We'll call to order the Monday, January 9th meeting of the District 99 Board of Education. Call the roll, please.
Bill White.
Here.
Julie Beckman.
Here.
Deb Boyle.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Nancy Kupka. Here. Peter Toon.
Here.
Terry Pavasich.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. This time we'll rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our workshop agenda is a discussion regarding the potential board self-evaluation retreat. Dr. McDonald, do you have anything to add before the board starts to discuss this?
Actually, I have a little bit to add, but I'd also like to add that apologize if the new configuration, or let me say tonight's configuration, has thrown us off. We are trying to experiment with different furniture setups. Since we've been televising, there are some issues with regard to seeing the board members, seeing the presenters, seeing the different screens, and so this is one way that we've come up with as a change to see if this works better, at least for meetings in this venue. So that's the issue with regard to the V and the board members being on two sides of the table and the administration being on two sides of the table. In terms of the workshop meeting, we've had previous discussion about this. This was initiated by Terry's request. And actually, at this point in time, as I put in the information for the meeting, I'd like to know from you whether there's enough interest among the board that you would support a retreat that all 7 members are willing to participate in and attend. That's the first question, because if the answer is we don't have that sort of support, then obviously it isn't worth the time to do additional planning. If that is so, next question is, are you interested in hiring Dr. Attia to facilitate the retreat? I have contacted Dr. Attia. He is available, even though he is beginning to reduce his client list because he is retiring for the second time, this time from his firm. He does enjoy working with this board and is interested in continuing to work with this board if we want him. And he would be available at different times this spring if we are interested in working with him either on a Saturday morning or on a weekend evening. However, as you recall, if we hire a consultant who is not affiliated with the Illinois School Board Association, then we would be obligated to have the meeting in public, or in a public meeting as opposed to a closed session. And if the answer is affirmative to Dr. Attia, then the question is, when can you be available for this this process? And as I've earlier indicated to the board in writing, I cannot recommend we try to do this in the next 2 months because of all the things coming across our desks, both administratively and you as the board. A lot of critical decisions are made at this time of year. Staffing decisions are coming up, budget decisions that are a big part of that. And there are also a number of obligations on Saturdays, including another Bagels with the Board, the forensic law workshop, and typically the board likes to attend the North-South basketball game because that's a community event, and other events that are going on in the schools over the next 2 months. So it's a busy time. Board members already give a lot of their time. I just can't recommend doing this prior to that time. So I think we're really talking about a retreat in April or May.
I think the first question is whether there is consensus that is something we want to schedule at this time, or something that we might want to talk about scheduling in the future. Anybody have any initial thoughts about the question of just having a retreat in general?
I would always support self-evaluation because we typically do it shortly after a new board is seated, and this is a little longer, but that might even be a better time, because we've had a chance to work together for a few months and we sort of know where we're coming from. I think it's a really good opportunity to share ideas and be constructively, and just get everyone sort of on the same page. We all understand we have our differences, our different ways of doing things, and it's a chance for us to get to understand each other even better in that setting.
Well, I do want to share, though, since many of the board members haven't been on the board since our last retreat, we do have a number of important issues coming up, and I'm not sure that we want to have the retreat until after we get some of those things settled. That to have a retreat in the middle of some important issues could cause more dissension, based on my prior experience with having retreats. But let's see, does anybody else have any thoughts? Whether they want to schedule something now, or maybe wait until April and then pick a time to do it?
Well, I think Dr. McDonald said we really shouldn't be putting much more on the calendar until April or May anyway. So, you know, I really, you know, this was brought forward by me, so you know, I'm willing to do this and make the commitment to do this at any time.
I think an
sooner rather than
evening
later.
session would be acceptable. We've done them both ways, and if you structure it correctly, and I'm sure Dr. Attia would do that if we decide to go with him. We
Well,
could do
then,
it in an evening.
who would be in favor of an evening session, say late April or early May? Nancy? Julia?
Show of hands.
Mike?
Maybe.
Maybe? Keith?
No.
No. Terry,
Oh,
you're
yeah,
yes?
no, I think I answered that.
It's a possibility. I'm inclined to say no, only because I've been through two of them, and I just didn't find that they were productive unless we had some consensus as to exactly what we wanted to accomplish.
Okay. Well, that's kind of
Having not gone,
half.
having not gone through this before too, I, kind of doing a little, getting to know each other better, and I'm still not really clear on what's the agenda, what's the goal, and then what do we do with that after we're done? And is this something that fits within a few hours on an evening or not?
It can. I mean,
Typically, Dr. Attia, well, and anybody who's done a self-evaluation aboard, there's a form that you fill out so that it gets you all focused on what the issues are. And I'm not sure that we've really settled on board goals yet either. We talked about district goals, and it might be, maybe we need to do that sooner, I don't know, but I thought we could really put them together with working with toward board goals as well. That would really be my goal.
pretty full agenda. You know, not much time to add many board goals between now and the end of the year.
I'm not saying adding them,
Okay.
I'm just saying
Right.
even make sure what we got are good goals. You know, I just don't think we've had an in-depth discussion. We had district goals.
Right.
but-
If I could, I've gone through several of these with different facilitators. I found weak facilitators, I found were not helpful. Good facilitators I thought were helpful. I think the essence in terms of the goal is to try to create an environment among the board that it can work together as a cohesive unit.
Right.
Not necessarily agreeing on all the issues, but being able to work together in a collaborative, professional type atmosphere. That where disagreements are honored for being disagreements and not personal issues. That the board members try to function in terms of listening to reports, considering the arguments, voting your conscience, which I believe most people try to do, but it is really one universal trait of these sessions is the attempt to try to get the group to operate as in an ideal policy-making board context. And so typically, yes, there are materials that the board members fill out and rate the board or rate themselves on. Typically, the consultant takes that information and prepares some of his facilitation, her facilitation with that information. And good facilitators guide the board to working through the issues without having it be a free-for-all and harsh words and such, but not some of the ones, frankly, that I've been involved in. I would agree with Debbie. I came away with that wishing that somebody else had done it because it wasn't, they did not accomplish the goal of doing it in a way that improved the relationship among the board. In fact, it seemed like it made it worse. Whether it actually did or not, it seemed like to me it did not help.
See, and to come off of that, in the abstract, I certainly support the concept of these types of retreats. But given what we have to get done this spring, if in fact our experience this time around is the same as it's been at the past two, okay, because set us back at a time when we have, because there are divisions which we're not going to hash out at one meeting. I'm thinking now perhaps the summer after we finished all the important business for this fiscal year, and then see if we get on the same page going into next year.
Are you thinking June, July?
Well, I'm thinking we decide a day. We don't decide today.
Right,
Right.
but you're just
No,
thinking.
after the conclusion of this year's business, because we have a teacher's contract, we have a number of important issues we have to settle. And I agree with Mrs. Boyle, I agree with Dr. McDonald. The last two board evaluations did not promote a collaborative, unified board. And to have such an experience while we're in the midst of one of these important issues could be very harmful. As I say, get through the year, and then over the summer, see if we can solve some of these issues going forward. And maybe, the passage of time will allow some of these things to fade, too. So
But I
that's where
think
I'm at.
also, Bill, that you're just kicking the can down the road. And sometimes it's better to clear the air and get things out and get things done so that you can move forward and get those important issues done. And by just kicking it down the road, doesn't solve any problems. All it does is create more and things fester a little harder. And I think that that's the wrong approach also. So,
I just don't believe that 2 or 3 hours with a consultant are going to solve some of the issues. And we spent a lot of time last fall supposedly clearing the air, and it didn't. So that's why we need...
well, then maybe, if I remember correctly, Dr. Attia did that one. Maybe then we need to find somebody else. If that was not to your liking, maybe we need to find someone else.
No, Mrs. Beth, because I was talking about the amount of time this board spent arguing about issues that aren't really critical to the purpose of the district.
Oh,
So, and therefore, with all of what we have to get done this spring, I'm certain, I believe in self-evaluation. I believe in the process. And I believe that we should do it after we finish the critical work for the current year, the teacher's contract and the other things that are coming up. So that's my opinion. And if 4 people feel differently, then we'll have one.
Well, I feel differently than you
Okay,
do.
okay. So,
But I don't think that your opinion should matter more than anyone else's.
absolutely, it matters 1/7. Absolutely, opinion matters 1/7.
I would prefer it be like April, May. That would be my opinion.
And then...
Especially if it's a well-handled,
Well, that's that's the crux of the matter. If it's well handled, but if it's not, and I don't know where we'll be with teachers' contracts, graduation. We have a lot of stuff coming up April and
True,
May too.
we always do. We always
And
do.
then to do it in June and July when the fiscal year,
Less.
the business for the year is gone.
Right.
And then we can look back at an entire year of how we operated together.
We've
Well,
actually done it.
That's my preference right now, is to talk, is this, in theory, I favor these types of events. I'm thinking now the summer, and then I don't favor picking a day right now.
Right.
I favor the summer. That's where I'm at right now. And of course, I'm 1 out of 7. If 4 of you disagree, that's what we're going to do, something different. Any other thoughts?
Well, clearly there's differences, and hopefully they're reconcilable, at least to the point where we can really work together in a good collaborative sense. But that's a goal that I think I've heard everybody agrees that they'd like to obtain. The question is it an obtainable goal? And is this the process to accomplish that? Is this the only way to get that done? So it sounds to me like it's more than a 2 or 3 hour endeavor. That's my feeling, and given everything that we have to do, I'd be in favor, and a little selfishly too, with my own personal schedule, and the kids ending up the school year waiting a little bit longer would be helpful for me, so.
Yeah, after the school, after school's out. Well, I think, if I'm counting this right, I don't think there's 4 prepared to move ahead in April and May.
Okay,
And then that means we'll.
all right.
And that's okay, Nancy? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, no, I'd support anything that is positive for team. I think team building is always a good goal. I would defer to Dr. McDonald, who understands what's coming across our desk, I think, better than most of us as to the timing of it. And I would just ask that we would vote, because I would say yes, and I would like to see it happen sooner.
Okay, well, we really, I'm not sure if it's a workshop item, but we can do a sort of a head nod, show of hands to get a consensus. It's not a binding vote, but just to see.
Actually, we can't vote as an action item because it's not on the agenda, is that?
Right, exactly. But
It's
so this is-
basically a head
It's a
nod
consensus.
consensus.
It's not a binding vote. Okay. So then in that case, I think I'll offer 2 options, and anybody interrupt me if you think they aren't good options. April, May, or summer? Nancy?
I would go for April, May.
Julia?
April, May.
Mike?
Summer.
Deb?
Summer.
Keith?
Summer.
April.
Summer.
Tiebreaker.
Okay. Our second item is a discussion regarding student fees.
Thank you, Mr. White. This is typically a time of year when we prepare administration prepares a recommendation to the board regarding school fees. We do this in part because it's part of our budget development process, in part because we have to do it at a time of year. It gives us enough time to put in all our materials for the following year. I've, without knowing, recalling exactly who and where said this, I have heard, and I think I've heard more than once, the board would like to at least consider reducing fees if possible. So instead of simply giving you a recommendation either tonight or on the 23rd or sometime in February about what those school fees or what the school fees might be for 2012-13, we thought we'd do this in a couple phases. One, tonight we sort of give you an overview of how historically we've addressed school fees and what previous boards frankly have directed us to do. And as I said in the materials, this board is not governed by the previous board, but an understanding of the previous board and how we function is helpful. And then after Mark's presentation, then we can have dialogue about what the board would really like to do, and then we'll follow up accordingly as we progress through the process.
Take a brief time out. Maybe, Mr. Bellini, I can't seem to get this to work.
You were having trouble too, weren't you,
Mine
Deb?
won't go through.
I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Sabotage.
That's it.
Ghost
It
in the
won't
machine.
go like here. See? Then I go into there, I go into the username. So I go ahead. But then when you go to like next or whatever, Mike and I couldn't get it done.
Oh. So now you gotta get into here too.
So you have to push that button in the bottom right.
Oh, this one and that one.
That's to get your keyboard down.
Okay.
Okay. Well, mine has more serious problems.
Now, flip it again.
Notice. Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
I didn't know you could do
That
that.
was crazy, didn't it? Just tap it, don't drag it. No, yeah, okay.
Well, that'll work.
All right, that's a
Let's
little-
try.
Okay. Wow, I get to be tech for a second, that's cool. He just showed me a little bit ago, so you learn by reteaching.
to add that to your job
That's right. Put it in there. Put it in there.
Yeah, really.
Tech advisor?
The overview of the points I'm going to try and hit, it's up here for the recording. It's on your own devices. You can use either one. I'm really just going to fly through this. There's maybe 10 or 12 slides, and some of it was just I'd like to go real brief history just in case, because the question is always asked, why public fees? We talk about our reliance on fees, just a minute on the format that we use, because it's a little bit different from some other schools, or you might see in other schools, or there are different formats. Make sure we're all on the same page with waivers. Then we'll talk real briefly about the historical changes. There's a little chart in there that you'll be able to see, and it just shows you where the fees have been for the last 9 or 10 years. And then a couple items for future change considerations. If this is something where the board is directing us or would like us to consider doing or want us to do, and then we'll save the last part just for board discussion. So jumping right into it, why are there fees in public schools? Public schools, supposed to be free education, and I think though what's changed since it was the Little Red Schoolhouse in one room, one teacher. You rode your horse to school. I'm talking about Mark, actually. He's the only person who did that, but we're the same age.
I went to a 2-room schoolhouse.
Yeah, that's right, actually, you did, so.
did I.
Just so much has changed, and comprehensive schools, to go beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic, have used fees to supplement their curriculum and what they offer. And also another part of it, which I think has made fees more of an issue in the last, say, 15, 20 years, is a shift from state support, where in the past, state support was easily a third of our revenue stream, and going back maybe 25 years now. But then in the last 2 decades, state support now has shifted down to 8% for our school district, and statewide, it's been chronically less than 50% of the total funding. So more and more schools have gone to fees, and in tax cap areas, fees have become an issue. You see them in the newspapers all the time. Schools are discussing fees, to raise the fee for this. And it's kind of a user fee mindset has crept in. And I think Downers Grove is a user fee. I'm just looking at the immediate. I know we serve many communities, several communities, but everybody even tags their garbage. That's not in every community. That's kind of like, if you need that space in the landfill, you buy a tag and you put it on your garbage can. And it's a user fee mentality at a lot of different levels in this area. And it's preferred to cutting a program. And there's a couple points in our more recent history where we've had to look at some significant cuts. And the decision was, would we reduce that opportunity for a student, or would we put it up, still keep it, but maybe support it with a fee, and so, or raise a fee that's already in place. That type of decision comes across the board's desk a lot. And in some cases, it becomes, I'm using the term a governor, a fee becomes a governor for certain programs where we want a little bit of buy-in from a user. Summer school is one, we're having that discussion now. Again, TCD was one that we instigated last year, where there was no fee for TCD. We would find out kids would sign up for it and then pull out or not go there. It was just another box to check for them, and didn't realize that there was a cost to the district, because once we reserve a spot at TCD, we had to pay for it. And so we put in a $200 fee so that there was a little bit of a hit. And if you were to pull out, it was non-refundable if it was something that you could, it was your election to do that. If it was something because of a curricular issue and we had to make the move, that we would refund that. But that's the type of, some of the rationale for why fees exist in public schools, why they're there. We use fees for technology. Textbooks is our largest one, registration and textbook. The general registration fee really is primarily for textbooks and supplies in the classroom. Technology is also helped by that. Labs for consumable materials is another fee that we have in place. driver education behind the wheel because of the intense cost of one teacher and 3 or 4 students in the car and behind the wheel. We have a waiver for that to get a higher fee. I think we're all familiar with that because we reduced it last year. TCD, there again, to defray costs, limit drops. Athletics and parking, kind of just program support, and parking a little bit, even just control student activity, so you can keep, what cars are in your parking lot. The fee levels that we use are consistent with most comprehensive high schools. We do, not every year, but I would say every 2 to 3 years, we do a pretty comprehensive review of what our fees are compared to other schools, because each school has a different mechanism, a different, different structure. And so it's very hard to make really good comparisons. Textbooks is probably the biggest fee that we have, the registration fee, which we just charge a fee for that. Many schools charge you for the textbook. And so you have to, it's kind of like a college setting where you buy the textbook and then sell it back to the bookstore, but if the book is out of print or they've gone to a new adoption, you eat that cost. So there's our fee is just kind of an average, and that's why I say it's an average cost over time for textbook usage and for lab and other fees. We use a flat fee for a lab regardless, and we know that it's a different actual cost for a chemistry lab as it is for a reading lab, say, or some other lab that's in place, or a jewelry lab, but we just try and use it for simplification. Flat fee amount that's kind of the average of all of them. And it also is easier for transferring. If a student transfers from one type of a lab course to another, you don't have to, you can just move it on the books and you don't have to refund money back and things like that. So it is a little bit easier. And it's becomes less of a barrier for course selection in some cases, where if we had to charge a $60 fee, because that's what, if we did it on an exact cost basis, or a $55 fee, that might keep some kids from going into some areas where it might be an economic decision then for them. And so the average fee method we think is working really well. Just I wanted to give you a background. That's how we do it here in District 99. Waivers. Law requires waivers for any class or activity that's required for graduation, plus a few other items. Eligibility for the waivers is really by law. We could change it if we wanted to make it more inviting or easier, or include more people, more inclusive. But the law requires anybody that's eligible for free or reduced lunch in the National School Program, and there's a family income based on number of size of the family and the monthly income or annual income of a family. Will let them be perhaps reduced or a free lunch. And there's also other criteria now that have come into play with that. Foster children, even if at the income level, it's not income-based, if it's a foster child, different individuals, and we get notified of that status through the state, and that's partly why our total has gone up to about 20%. There's some automatic notification through the state for foster children and in other situations, other students. So we automatically get notified that we have a student that is eligible to be free and reduced without doing an income verification, and we then contact the parent and they have to opt out of it. And so that's another reason why I think some of our numbers have gone up. And just one more point in that area, we have gone to the ID cards and actually online for lunch, paying for lunch as a meal pay system. And now it's not as overt of an identification in the cafeteria of you walking up and not having to pay any money. There's no cash exchange, because a lot of people don't have cash exchange. So it's not clear that you're a free or reduced child anymore. So that also, by the way, has probably increased our total identification. We probably had a higher identification for many years, but for different reasons, they did still people elected not to qualify for the waiver or to submit for it. Just to make it really clear, though, the district absorbs the loss. We've never made an adjustment in a fee because of the waivers or because of the increase in the waivers. Basically, we just eat it in the ed fund and have had to find other ways to cover it. But we haven't raised fees for the other people in this, and you'll see that our track record for raising it. We never, there's no relationship between the number of waivers we have and the fee we charge. The fee we charge it originally was based on like a percentage of the total cost, 65% or so of certain lab fees, of the total lab fees, and, or different costs that we have. And so that was the standard, and we just increased it basically for inflation, and I'll get to that in a minute or two. But the district also does, while we're on this topic, allow deferred and extended pay option for those that don't qualify for a waiver. So if your family income is too high to, qualify you for a reduced lunch, we still, we're pretty easy on payment plans. We allow you to make it over the course of the year, and we don't put a lot of pressure on our parents, just so you know, but we do try and collect it by the time they graduate. Fees that we do waive: registration, textbook fees. These are all required by law. Lab fees, field trips, athletic fee for the first two sports. And actually, for a third sport, when we raised the fee several years ago, we agreed it's very few kids, but if a child is in a third sport, we thought that 2 sports is enough of a burden, and to not charge them for a third sport, even if they don't qualify by the National School Lunch criteria. Something that's not waived fees are event, activity fees, yearbook, parking. Historical changes to the fees. That was the most school-related inflation picture that I could find. It's kid blocks there. And really, we had a long period of time where I think we let 5 or 6 years go. We didn't increase the fees, and then we needed to adjust the budget, and we had to look at fees. We were behind what other schools were at, and so we decided to hit it a little harder than normal, and we didn't like doing that. We didn't like to have to make more than a couple dollar change in a fee at any one time. And so we do have, I guess, a philosophy of trying to just keep up with inflation or gradually make changes. Don't let a fee go more than 2 or 3 years without making an adjustment in it, and keep it current so that we don't have to make a bigger adjustment. Some larger increases were necessary in certain years when we were making major budget balancing changes, 5, 6, 9, 10, 10, 11. You can see on this next exhibit, this is, I guess, about a 9 or 10 year history of what we've done. If you see a number that's a little bit bolder, it doesn't show really well there, but if it's bolder, that just visually to help you see that's the year that we made a change, an increase in the particular line item. And then the one in red, obviously, in the far right-hand corner, that's where we reduced it down to $250 just to keep it at the state. The state now has a fee for driver's education without asking for a waiver of up to $250, and that's what we are currently charging for driver's education. So that's a little history. I mean, we do make it small adjustments. You can see the TCD enrollment about the 5th item down there is started in 2010-11. Again, that was just to encourage a little buy-in from those individuals and to offset those costs. There's transportation costs and other costs that we pay to TCD for students to attend. So it was part of the 2010-11 budget changes that we made. Future change considerations, and I'm getting kind of close to the end here of the presentation. Really, as we start to make these considerations, I want us to, I always like to make sure there's a big dark cloud behind every silver lining. And in this case, it's not too hard to find it. It's the state of Illinois budget still isn't resolved. There's no, they talk about kicking a can down the street. That's what's happened with the General Assembly. We don't know when it's going to drop. I mean, if you just look at their balance sheet, you know it's going to happen. At some point, they're going to have to balance things out, and their revenues are not as high as their expenditures. I think they're hoping for an economy recovery, which will generate more revenue for them, and they can kind of get out of the problem, but I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. So that's still a big concern for me. If we were to consider any significant reductions in fees, I still would want that problem to be resolved so that we would know going forward what we have in front of us. Plus, we have other initiatives. We have District 99 initiatives that we would like to do, the strategic plan. There's several items and goals in there. There's things that I think there's a lot of exciting things that we're just stepping into. Technology is one. We don't know where that will lead us. Leiden High School just went to the one-on-one, I think it's laptops with all of their students. I don't know how far other schools will be behind that. I know where we'll be if we ever get there or not, but there's things like that that are on the horizon. Master Site Plan has quite a few items on there that we'd all like to do. And for consistency, unless it's my carpenter's level that we have down there, you know, we've always been very strategic with our fees. We've tried to be careful if we make changes that the fee changes that we know we can sustain for a long time, and that there wouldn't be something we would do for a couple of years and then put it back, because we just want to make sure we can live with it. And so we would like to make a long-term view if we do make any changes, and also because it adds to consistency in the level of programming that we provide to all of the students that we represent and serve. I have what I would say is a preliminary fee recommendation from the administration, and that's what we'd like you to talk about in a minute or two. That would be a freeze of fees, a second-year freeze, rather than any kind of a rollback. Again, for the reasons I just mentioned, the condition of the state of Illinois, until we've really locked in and crystallized some of our other strategic initiatives that we'd like to do, because those are big-ticket budget items. And so I'd like us to kind of get those items worked through a little bit before we make a rollback. But I think a freeze is something we could sustain. And I do think the economy is very tight, and we understand that, and I think a freeze would be appropriate. But that's just what, right now, we're just going to get our first 6 months of review. I haven't even seen that, we haven't closed the books for December yet. We'll be doing that, I think, tomorrow. We'll have that. We'll start to get information. I'll have my first 6-month quarterly for you at this January board meeting, and that'll start to tell us if our budget is in line with expectations, and that'll kind of help us give a little more frame to the 2012-13 budget production and preparation. Formal recommendation, though, then will be at the February 27th Board of Education meeting, so we have time. That's when we actually usually make a fee recommendation to the board, a formal one. So we'll have time to talk about it tonight and then think about it and then bring you a recommendation based on what we discussed tonight. And at that time, we'll also have comparisons to other school districts, so we can see where we are. It's time for us to do that again. This is just, and I've asked Rod to pass these out to the other side. These are here, and this goes that direction. This is just for you to keep. And obviously you can get into board docs and get it, but it's just kind of the heart of it all, I think. The top column are the major fees that we charge in terms of that really support programs the most. There are some other fees, but we could get you that too if you wanted to see what some of these other fees are. But the top 5 fees really: textbook and registration, English, the paperback. When we started this at the freshman level several years ago, where freshmen are required at that time to all get a certain series of novels, and they were to keep them, they mark them up, and so there was a pretty high consumable cost. The cost was over $30, I think, when we did it, but we decided to assign a lab fee to that to try and defray it. And then each succeeding grade would also have the same requirement each year, so now all 4 years have a series of novels and paperbacks that they're required to use in their curriculum. And so we charge that fee at every level now. And so that's why it was just separated out. The English paperback was a separate fee and only at certain grades before, but now it affects just about everybody. The regular labs, actually, it's about 1 3/4 labs on average that our kids end up taking on average over all 4 years per year, actually per semester, per year, actually. And then driver's ed behind the wheel, $250 is what it is currently. 1,200 is an estimate of what the number of students that took that last year. The number enrolled in charge is actually a year old, so I'd have to update that. But that was what it was last year. Athletic participation is $115, and roughly 2,600 students paid that fee. So you can see what the gross amounts are in the light, small gray numbers there. About did I lose my Lost my screen up there, huh?
That's okay, we have.
All right, Jackie, what
But they
happened?
don't have it on TV.
Lost Greg too. Greg? I think I know what I have to do here. Yeah, it's somehow it's got the red X. Yeah, we're pretty close. Everybody got it in their laptop? Okay, because we'll try and correct it. But I'll move ahead of mine. The, yeah, I got that too. The waivers are below it in red, that's roughly 20% of those amounts. Thanks, Greg. And it's just over there, from current slide, there we go. So the waivers, again, are at roughly 20% of the totals. That's pretty much across the board. They're active in just about everything, so it hits almost everything, about 20%. And this is what the net proceeds are. So we're talking about a revenue item of about $1.7 million to the district, $1,694,000. And I just put on the bottom in orange, and this is why I gave you a copy to take with you so you can scribble on it or think about it. I mean, a fee change up or down, and I just kind of use some bigger numbers here. If we were going to change the textbook registration fees, because the number enrolled or charged changes for each one of these. It's not as simple. So I wanted to just give an easy shot at it. So $20,800 is what a $5 up or down would be to our revenue stream, an estimated amount. $4,000 roughly for an English paperback, that fee, $1 there. And because of the other lab fees, are more than just one per student, because some the use is about 1 3/4 per. It's $20,000. I figured I was live here. Driver's ed, $24,000 if we were to change it up or down by $25, and then for a $5 change in the athletic participation fee, it would be about a $13,000 adjustment. So you have to think about it two ways. What's the amount, what would be a meaningful impact of any of these to a parent, and then what would be the, then plug it into that formula. If it's $25, it's going to be a little over $100,000 for the textbook and registration. If we were to, 5 times the 5. So I just wanted to give you a little chart that you could use. And that was really
That's helpful.
all I had. We just wanted to hear what your comments were now. We'll take it back, or even if in the next week you mull it over and have some thoughts about it and you want us to think about it, we have another board meeting where we could talk about it a little more if that was necessary. And then in February, again, bring you a recommendation in February what we think we would like to do.
Okay, anybody want to start us off with comments about
Or
fees?
questions?
I'm sorry, questions for Mark? or-
I just have a quick question. My concern on the textbook and registration fee is this, refresh my memory about how often do we change textbooks? I know, I'm trying to get a feel for how long we're going to be using, maybe the last textbooks I think we bought were for
EPC.
freshman history.
I mean, they're all on a different
Something like
adoption
that, and it
cycles.
was
Really
like
quick.
a $130 book or something, and so if we're getting 3 years or 4 years
Yeah, I think we get
or
more out of that, but I think.
5 years kind of thing,
I think it changes by the curriculum. I mean,
Because I haven't
I
seen
can't
that many
answer that,
books coming
but that's a good
across
question.
our requests lately, so I don't know, are we getting some longevity, or are we getting upgrades on these books via discs?
I think we
Because I'd like to see us kind of
I don't
move
have
in
that, I don't have that in my head either.
No,
But I believe we have tended to use the books for a long time, as long as we can. There are some curriculums where the information changes very rapidly, and so we would have to change the book relatively rapidly. But additionally, we also, a lot of the supplemental materials now are computer-based.
Right.
Right,
And
it
so-
pays for that as well, and
At a
also
certain level,
rebinding
we
of some of
are-
the current books.
We are more and more expanding the concept of textbook to an electronic
Right.
application. And there are people out there who say, there will be a time in the future when we won't be purchasing the actual books. We will download them onto some sort of device. Now,
Well-
that doesn't mean they're going to be free when that happens.
Right.
Or rent it
It-
cheaper.
It's
They'll
my
be-
understanding
they'll be
that the book
somewhat
companies
cheaper,
are going to be sure and get their
But
fair
they won't
share.
be absolutely cheaper.
Right.
But Judy, do you have a?
I think there's also, with the Common Core state standards coming out and being due by 2014, a lot has been held up in terms of textbook development, because whereas English and mathematics are pretty much in tow, a lot of textbook developers are waiting to find out what the assessments are going to look like. And then down the pike, also, the science Common Core standards, those are also in the pipeline too. So there's a lot of people waiting with bated breath to find out what is going to happen as a result of the Common Core. And then following that, then determinations will be made both by textbook companies, assessment companies, and then roll down to school districts as to how we'll follow suit.
So, I mean, I'm just looking ahead. That's something that we've got to think about because, this number is going to be affected by that greatly because if they all come in at one time, we're going to need to make evaluations and have resources available to us to make those changes one way or another.
I think a more focused question, though, is down the line, are we flat out purchasing textbooks, or are we renting them with some kind of contractual agreement that, it charges a monthly or yearly fee, and those can be switched out whenever we like, to have that type of flexibility. So I think that's probably a more important question in my mind.
Is that happening at a district we know about, where there's, are you talking, I'm sorry, I should have asked.
No, that's good.
Are you talking about, Keith, where a district rents from the textbook company?
Correct.
Is that happening at districts?
It's
we know
happening
about?
around the area in some cases. It's not widespread yet, but I think like Judy was saying, that the impact of the Common Core that's going to happen in the next few
Sure.
years
It's gonna
is
be
making
huge.
some districts reevaluate that.
Well, if that's the case, I'd like to see us look into CDs and more electronic things because our students shouldn't be carrying, 80 pounds of books back and forth every day. I mean, that just is, in this day and age, when it can all fit.
Kindle. I had a question regarding TCD. I know we did make that charge last year. Did it have any impact on enrollment in TCD, do we know? That we were charging the extra 200?
Well, actually, we did this, at the same time, we capped enrollment at 175.
Right.
So, and I think
Right.
we're probably close to that. So,
So we stayed near, we didn't go way under the cap?
yeah, so
or-
it wasn't, it did drive people off of that.
Right.
So I
Okay.
think those that took it, I don't think we had a problem with paying for tuition that we weren't having, so.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was a great idea to do that.
Yeah, we made, I believe it caused some decisions to be made faster about whether they were going to go to it or not. And so it made, rather than just let kids would just let it hang there until other courses got settled in and then they would decide whether or not to go. It was making them decide a little sooner, and that was good because we were paying for like 5 or 6 open
That was
seats that we weren't
substantial.
Actually, more than
getting.
that, I believe.
Yeah.
More like a dozen.
And then that.
Several thousands of dollars a person.
And we didn't drop, and then we didn't have that dropout rate, right? Once they paid the 200.
My recollection, I did not look at that information. My recollection is we did not have
The dropout.
degree of the dropout.
I would think not, but, okay, thanks.
Bill?
Mark, can you tell me, when did we as a district start charging the registration and lab fees? I see our chart
It
goes
precedes
back,
me. I've been here 18 years. It was, I think it's, I really can't answer that exactly. I mean, I know it's been more than 2 decades.
It was after 1987, I can tell you that.
Oh,
We
okay, you
didn't
didn't
have
pay.
those fees. No.
Okay.
We had a standard textbook rental, we had yearbook, and we had an activity fee. Those are the only things.
But
But
not
textbook
lab fees.
rental.
Did not have lab.
Oh, were you asking just the lab fee, or were you asking all?
I'm asking registration,
So you did pay a
textbook, lab
registration in
Small
87?
fee. I want to say it was around $50 or so. I remember writing a check as a senior for like $125 total, everything.
That's 34 years ago, so I mean, it goes pretty far back.
I was 14 years old. What the difference?
Just last year, I know.
And can you tell me, what are our guidelines on this? Is there any limit to how much we can charge? And I mean, what's,
No, actually, there isn't a statute. The only one that is, or that ever had a cap on it, was the driver's ed fee. And it was specifically because they only wanted that fee to be for gasoline or supplies. And so they felt $50 fee. But it's the only one I'm aware of where there's an actual cap on the fee amount. So you can charge more. Depending on the particular fee, we've always been very careful about what that would do to student attendance, like for athletics. We've had long debates over athletic fees. There was a strong desire by a couple of board members, or at least one, several years ago, I recall, to raise the athletic fee because, private athletics, we have better than private athletics that we offer here, and they pay a lot more money for that, is what I think this position was. But then the concern was that some kids may just not go if they can't waive, or if they aren't waived from the fee, and some families just can't afford it, and maybe they won't go to that second sport. And so we didn't want to, there's a balance with the opportunities for students. And so, even though I don't think there's a legal limit on the other fees other than the driver's ed, and we do have a waiver. We did have a waiver for that. Now they finally raised that to $250 and acknowledged that that fee needs to cover more than just gasoline and cars. And so I don't think there is a limit on those others. It's just community, what we feel the community would expect and what we can do.
well, I'll confess to being one of the board members who wanted this looked at.
It's a good thing to look at.
From the standpoint of athletic fees, I mean, that's an elective sort of, and I don't have much of an issue with things that you have a choice about whether or not you're going to do or not do. But when it comes to the registration textbooks, I can tell you, I have 4 children, and I'm sure I'm not the only parent in our community that has multiple children. And when I look at all these fees, I'm seeing a lot of dollar signs coming out of working in my own personal budget going forward. And I know that's something that a lot of our parents are bearing right now in a time that's pretty difficult financially for many. And so I'm certainly happy to see that the forward looking right now is that there's not a need from your standpoint to raise fees, but to be sure, I'm looking for ways that we could possibly reduce the fees. So that's my attitude about this right now, in terms of the registration, textbook, lab fees, the things that walking in we don't have any choice about, and so that's all I have to say on the matter for now. I understand we're going to talk more about it.
I really appreciate the background, the statistics.
Well, there is something that other schools, I mean, and we can talk about it, but I really want for us to take it in. But there are fees. I think we talked about this with athletics, about multiple students, and so like a family fee or maximum. But I've not seen that done for registration and textbooks. But I mean that has been used by other schools and for other types of fees. Like if you have 3 kids, and you want them to all go out for 2 sports. And it's actually kind of the opposite of what you just said. That's an elective thing, but just so you don't discourage their participation, because there's a strong belief in you get a kid you connect them to the school through those other things, not just through the books. You get them through athletics and different areas, activities. That really is a key to a good system. But we could consider a multiple type fee, if you have more than 3 fees or whatever is in your bank account at the time, that's a maximum we could take. You know, not you. Let's forget we're being taped here.
You know,
Say true. Thank you for laughing. Those are.
Though on the other hand, looking at it from a different perspective, I have a daughter who's currently a sophomore, and when I look at, you know, the English paperback fee, I couldn't buy the book she's reading for that amount of money.
That's true.
Nowhere near. It would be 3, 4, 5 times what we're paying for it. The amount of just paper she comes home, the level of her science labs, and what's going into her chemistry class, you know.
It's a bargain.
I feel like we're in a bargain. I understand the concern, especially in these economic times, but on the other hand, we just have to be careful about.
I'll just point out my, you know, I'm paying taxes, and I
So am I.
expect that my taxes are actually paying for a lot of that. And so, so I am interested in learning more about the history, and I appreciate the presentation tonight, how it came to be, and understanding the rationale behind it. Hard to argue, you're right. For that cost, the amount of books, and what you're getting, it seems like a good deal, but I'm already paying property taxes. And it's public education, and so I've heard this from other parents. I'm signing my kids up for school, and I'm writing a big check, and hey, I thought this was public education. I thought my property taxes were already paying for this. And so,
But that money has to come from somewhere, and if you take away the fees, the property tax will have to go up.
Mm-hmm.
That's
true.
or we need to cut something in order to live within those means.
But what they're saying then is you get all these books you couldn't buy on your own for the
Right.
fee. So
There's an advantage to having us all be doing this collectively. That's right.
And, you know, just looking at it from the, and now I am a non-user of District 99.
Yeah.
And I contribute a very large chunk of my tax dollars come to this district also. And I see that, you know, it's kind of the user fee kind of thing. And, you know, I figure if your students are using it, they should be paying for the books that they're using. And I can pay for the building, the grounds.
Teacher salaries.
The salaries, you know, all of that kind of thing. So, you know, there's a fine line between both of those things. And I have paid. I had 3 students, and I had 2 in school most of the time together. And so I understand your pain, but...
Well, I will be. I'm not correct.
and right now...
You're saving up, right?
Because of the college fees that I'm paying, this is nothing.
Do you not pay,
So-
I'm sorry, do you not pay for registration fees for grammar school in this
Absolutely.
district?
District 58.
Yeah.
Mhm. They're not nearly
That's not-
as high.
But I think the other thing, though, too, is the way it looks, the line items, you know, it's 20 here, it's 20 here. I mean, if you're going to do the English and paperback and the regular labs, roll it all in one fee, call it $250, you know, instead of here's this, here's, oh, and then you've got driver. I mean, I understand driver's ed. I think that's totally appropriate. Summer school, totally appropriate. TCD, absolutely appropriate. When I was in school, we did not have an athletic fee. The school I currently teach, Lake Park, does not have an athletic fee. I think we could justify eliminating that if we had corporate sponsorship, if that's a route that the board would like to go down. Because I think what Mr. Stan was just mentioning, you get buy-in to the school, whether it's, and I'm talking athletics or extracurriculars. You get more buy-in from our students, school spirit. From an athletic standpoint, obviously you're going to have, you know, that tie-in with physical education, with standards of health. But I think you're going to get more school spirit and get more people that will maybe be willing to donate to the Educational Foundation when they're alumni because they had such a fantastic experience. It's one of the reasons why I think I ran for the board is because of my experience in District 99 as well. I think it can be done, and I don't think we should wait on the state. I think if we know what our fees are, take that to the public, and we find a way to live within our means if that's what we're going to do. But athletic fees is something I personally would like to see go away, or at least the the regular labs and the English paperbooks, roll it all into one, call it one fee, and be done with it.
Okay, any other thoughts?
One, we were talking a little bit about the TCD and how increasing the fee to $200 did prevent some of those families from pulling out at the last minute, and which I think was a real smart thing. But my question is one of the things that we talked about when we did this was perhaps when they were finished with that program, having some sort of fee being reimbursed maybe back to the parents. And the reason I ask about this is only because the TCD program has an X amount of children in it, and so do some of the children take advanced classes and things like that. And I was just wondering, does it seem to anybody, and I'm not saying I feel this way, but there have been a couple parents that approached me on it, did it seem unfair to anybody that we would charge the kids that were going to the TCD program the $200 and not some extra fees for, let's say, taking advanced placement classes or things like that? We charged them the $200 so that they wouldn't drop out, but at the end, those parents whose students stayed in the TCD program, the $200 came out of their pocket for that. Now I realize the TCD program is more expensive than $200, but so are maybe some other classes that kids take too. And I'm just putting it out there. I heard a couple of things. I'm not saying one or the other.
Are you suggesting that it would be the $200 that would be refunded back to the
or
parents?
maybe not all of it, or some of it, or
Right.
sort of like a where they get a their child completes it and they get something back, so it doesn't cost them the whole $200. But if they drop out, we eat it, they lose it.
In that fee, those advanced placement classes, if they want to take the tests, those are at least $80 a piece. Am I correct
Right.
about that
Exactly.
price? So if you've got a student who's got 2 or 3 of those, right there you're at your $200 level and above. So I think that was kind of the reasoning behind that is that those students, in order to get that credit, and then those students that are at TCD do get
Right.
a certificate of whether they're in secretarial or
Cosmetology, auto
Sure.
shop.
right.
And
All
that's a
of those
good
things
argument.
are going towards a specific career path, and
And that's an excellent argument, although it's just that was not the argument that we made when we put in the $200. The reason we did it was mainly because we didn't want them to drop out. So that was the reason that I bring it up.
Right.
I would think too, a transportation cost
Well, sure.
would be
huge. I mean, throughout the entire year as
Sure.
well.
a lot more than $200.
There were a lot of factors that was key. Probably the primary, you're right, Debbie, was the primary was, we started to scrub that line item a little bit and take a look at really what was happening with it, and saw that we had some lost revenue or really expenditures that weren't being just wasted, basically, because kids would not fill those spots, and we had to guarantee a certain number by a certain date. But there's also the transportation that Keith just mentioned. But I think there's also a lot of other schools don't use TCD as much as we do. And so there was discussion at that time of cutting it back to only 150 slots or 100 slots. And so that became part of our thinking in that is that, well, let's keep roughly the same number of slots. I think we had just about 175 actual users, but we were paying for like 185. I think I remember maybe 5 or 7, but Mark says maybe 12 more. And so we were saying, let's cut it back to what we're using. Let's keep that option open for our students, but let's charge that fee, which will help, because that was at the time we were making some pretty good cuts in the budget. And if we cut that line back, we'd be paying less tuition out to TCD and less. We could probably cut one bus, I think, or we were going to try and just cut it back. We decided not to. Let's leave the option there. So that was one of those pieces, and that was a multifaceted decision. But you're right. The primary
I just bring it up just
was to
in case
get
we
buy-in.
wanted to just discuss that again, or if we had any
Yeah.
other extra thoughts on it. I wasn't
Yeah,
one
no,
way or the other, but
that's
I
a-
did want us to just sort of revisit it.
Yeah, and that's, and actually, we've been talking about that same idea a little bit with summer school for students, because there isn't
They
enough
do the
buy-in
same
there. and to possibly rebate some of that back if they attend and they pass the class. So we're throwing different things around in that, so it's not a unheard of idea, but it's also something that we can bring back and talk about.
Okay, anybody else want to add anything? Yes? Let's say if anybody has any significant objection to the freeze idea, maybe contact Dr. McDonald next week or two, or Mark, next couple weeks, just to give him a heads up before what your thoughts are ahead of time, so we can avoid any surprise on that.
All right,
Okay?
thank you. Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is reception of visitors. I don't see any, so I won't call for any if someone wants to jump up and speak. Okay, we move now to our two closed session items. And initially, we will need a motion. I will say what this is about, because they so moved if they wish. To go into closed session for the appointment and employment of civic employees, more specifically provided in 5 ILCS 120/2C1, and also litigation covered under 5 ILCS 120/2C11. Is there such a motion?
I'll make the motion to go into closed session.
Vice President Boyle moves.
I'll second.
Member Padler seconds. Call that vote, please.
Deb Boyle.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Julie Beckman.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye.
Keith Mitchell.
Aye.
Bill White.
Aye. The board, go ahead.
As long as we get a break before we go into it.
Well, we're in it. But we will, we're in closed session. We'll take a 5-minute recess then.